This week, another frequently requested character gets the basics treatment. One of the most powerful and dangerous Decepticons around. The ultimate evolution of Megatron. Forged in the fires of Unicron, these are the basics on Galvatron. The character of Galvatron was developed for 1986's The Transformers the Movie. His toy transformed into a futuristic laser cannon and a handheld laser pistol, and was created based on the artwork of the film's character designer Floro Deary, which was the opposite of how Transformers toys were normally created at the time, since the toy itself usually came first. But Deary's design underwent further revisions after the figure went into production, meaning that it wound up looking quite different from how Galvatron would appear in animation, most noticeably by having a predominantly grey colour scheme instead of the film's purple. Early promotional material for the toys and film hid Galvatron's true identity, presenting him as merely Megatron's new city commander. It wasn't until audiences saw the movie that they discovered Galvatron was, in fact, Megatron himself. Badly wounded after his final battle with Optimus Prime in the year 2005, the Decepticon leader was set adrift in space by the treacherous Starscream, where he was found by the monster planet Unicron. Requiring a servant to acquire for him the Autobot matrix of leadership, Unicron reformatted Megatron into Galvatron. But Galvatron refused to be Unicron's slave and tried to use the Matrix against his new master. Unable to wield the Matrix's power, Galvatron wound up being defeated by one who could, the new Autobot leader Rodimus Prime, who ended the film by hurling Galvatron into the depths of space. The subsequent third season of the Transformers animated series revealed that Galvatron went on to crash land in a pit of plasma on the planet Thrull, which affected his mind, driving him maniacally insane. It was in this unhinged state that he returned to lead the Decepticons against Rodimus and the Autobots for the remainder of the series. But his instability sometimes made him as much of a threat to his own troops as to their enemies, leading to a showcase episode in which they attempted to commit him to psychiatric care, with predictably disastrous results. For his debut in the movie, Galvatron's voice was provided by Leonard Nimoy.
I will rip open Ultra Magnus and every other Autobot until the Matrix has been destroyed.
But for the series, regular Megatron actor Frank Welker took up the role.
Crush the earth and its puny humanity! Crush anyone, anything that dares to oppose us!
Following the end of the cartoon, Galvatron continued to appear in the Japanese exclusive sequel series 1987's The Headmasters, in which he attempted his craziest plan yet, fusing his body with the Earth itself in order to transform himself into a Unicron-like being. He was stopped by the Autobot Headmasters, who crushed him under an iceberg. And that was the end for Galvatron, until the 1991 series Return of Convoy, when his remains were recovered by the alien Dark Nova, and he was rebuilt into Megatron once more. Galvatron was also a major character in the Marvel comic published in the United Kingdom, which, like the toy, based his appearance on Floro Deary's early design, complete with grey colour scheme. The comic presented Galvatron as a time traveller who came back from the future era seen in the movie to menace the Transformers of the then present day of the 1980s. Physically invincible, but with a tenuous grip on sanity thanks to his abuses of time travel, Galvatron spent over 100 issues plotting to ensure his dominance in the future. He repeatedly faced off against Ultra Magnus in some of the most iconic clashes of the series, but the pair never got to have a final battle. Instead, Galvatron met his ultimate end when the time stream caught up to him, and he was torn to shreds by a rift in the fabric of time. Galvatron grew to become a favourite of UK writer Simon Furman, and a year after the character's demise, Furman decided to introduce a new version of him in the pages of the American comic book. This Galvatron, who later came to be known as Galvatron 2, to distinguish him from the character who had appeared in the UK stories, hailed from a post-apocalyptic alternate future where the Decepticons ruled Earth. He was brought to the present against his will by Unicron to serve as his herald, but just as rebellious and as insane as ever, Galvatron turned on his master and set out to conquer present-day Earth. He was defeated and sent to an icy grave by Fortress Maximus, but he would return in the 2013 sequel comic Regeneration 1, providing Furman the opportunity to write the final Galvatron Ultra Magnus showdown that the UK comic had lacked, even if it wasn't the same Galvatron. The 21st century would also see Galvatron 2 make some scattered appearances in Japanese media, which presented him as having travelled across time and space into the universe of the original cartoon. The first new character to bear the name Galvatron was the Predacon leader of the 1998 Japanese exclusive series Beast Wars 2nd. However, just like the Beast Wars version of Megatron, he was a distinct character separate from the Generation 1 original who shared his name. And this episode is long enough already, so like Megatron, I'll talk about him in his own video someday. The first series to revisit the original idea of Galvatron as an evolved version of Megatron was 2001's Robots in Disguise, in which an infusion of mysterious energy from an underground pyramid upgraded this series' version of Megatron with vampiric energy-draining powers. Rather than a brand new toy, as in Generation 1, this Galvatron was simply a recolor of Megatron, beginning a practice that would continue for the next several years. All three installments of the Unicron trilogy also featured their own recolored Galvatron. In each series, Megatron would become Galvatron, then apparently die at the end of the series, return to life as Megatron at the start of the next series, and then be upgraded into Galvatron again. In 2002's Transformers Armada, a Minicon Power Boost transformed him. In 2004's Transformers Energon, which directly homaged the design of Generation 1 Galvatron, it was immersion in Super Energon. And in 2005's Transformers Cybertron, it was the energy of the Cyber Planet key of Gigantian, the giant planet. Now, where Generation 1 had drawn a pretty clear dividing line between Megatron and Galvatron, these new Galvatrons were just treated as being Megatron with new colours. There was no accompanying change in form or voice or personality. The next Megatron to undergo the evolution into Galvatron was the live-action movie incarnation of the character, as seen in 2014's Age of Extinction. After his decapitation by Optimus Prime in 2011's Dark of the Moon, Megatron's severed head was acquired by tech company KSI. Unaware that Megatron's brain still functioned, KSI were clueless as he secretly took control of their initiative to create man-made Transformers and constructed a new body for himself into which he transferred his consciousness. Reborn as Galvatron with an atypical truck alternate mode, and with Frank Welker returning to reprise the role, he was now a soulless revenant without a spark.
You have no soul! That is why I have no fear.
But when he returned in 2017's The Last Night, just like the Unicron trilogy, he was back to being Megatron again with no explanation. This emergent tendency to treat Galvatron as a sort of temporary powered-up form for Megatron, who inevitably defaults back to his original identity, is likely an outgrowth of Hasbro's steadily increasing efforts to maintain a consistent core cast of recognizable characters across the different Transformers series. Simply put, they don't want to replace Megatron. Witness the Megatron of Transformers Prime, who was evolved into a new, more powerful form by Unicron, but whose name didn't change. The original Galvatron remains a fan-favourite character who's continued to make intermittent appearances in 21st century media, and toys and merchandise of him have continued to be released, including a reissue of his original toy in animation-accurate purple. But there have been noticeably fewer figures made in his image than you might expect for a character of his historical significance. Recent years have seen Hasbro introduce Galvatronus, a combiner who looks like Galvatron, but isn't, in both the Combiner Wars and Robots in Disguise toy lines. Though for his release in Japan, Combiner Wars Galvatronus was recolored in original toy grey to become a new version of Galvatron 2. Simon Furman found a simple solution to the problem of Galvatron when he introduced the character into IDW Publishing's Transformers comic book universe in 2007. In order to include one of his favourite characters without having to take Megatron off the table or rely on complicated concepts like time travel, he simply reinvented Galvatron as a totally separate character, entirely unconnected to Megatron or Unicron. A recurring antagonist for over a decade of IDW's comics, this Galvatron was a puritanical barbarian from Cybertron's prehistory, the twin brother of RC and a former servant of the original 13 Primes. Galvatron left Cybertron as part of a crew led by Nova Prime in search of new worlds to conquer, who disappeared into the undead alternate dimension known as the Dead Universe. Coveting this realm's dark power, Galvatron turned on Nova and took the power for his own, but in doing so fell under the influence of the Dead Universe itself, and was almost duped into destroying Cybertron until he was stopped by the Autobots. Free of the Dead Universe, Galvatron later took command of the leaderless Decepticons, and launched a new campaign to conquer Earth, but he was ultimately defeated and executed by a regretful Optimus Prime. The idea of Galvatron as a separate individual from Megatron was also used in the Aligned continuity. The 2013 guidebook, The Covenant of Primus, mentioned Galvatron as the leader of a cult of chaos on ancient Cybertron. There's every chance that this approach might continue. Today, in 2019, Megatron is one of the most recognizable, marketable faces of the Transformers franchise, so it doesn't seem very likely that Hasbro will ever again risk phasing him out by transforming him into Galvatron in anything more than a very temporary capacity. Only the future will tell. But what do you think about this situation, Galvatron?
Well, all I can say is...
And those are the basics on Galvatron. Let me know your favorite version of him in the comments. Are you Team Grey or Team Purple? If you aren't already, please subscribe for more from the world of the Transformers, and if you can, please consider supporting the series on Patreon.